Thanks again for being here. I'm Melissa Early, a Central Region board member for BHA here in Utah. I'm using our national staff person's Zoom account, Katie DiLorenzo. So that's why my name is different. Just to think about the common ground that BHA and TU have. Our organizations have so much in common, from headwater streams where trout spawn to high country lakes, rivers, urban river paths that we enjoy to recreate on and fly fish, and also all the public land that provides drinking water and amazing opportunities for us as public landowners. So back a few months ago, our national staff people joined together to really, make an effort to say we have so much in common as organizations. And, really, we encourage you, if you're not a member already, to really think about getting a membership in both Backcountry Hunters and Anglers and TU. And I will put those links in the chat box in just a bit. And just a few announcements about some projects that we have coming up with Backcountry Hunters and Anglers in collaboration with TU and also Wild Utah Project. We have more beaver dam analogs happening this summer in Parley's and Lamb's Canyon. And some of you joined last year or this fall. Really great way to roll up your sleeves and really help make a difference for trout habitat and mitigating erosion, sedimentation, and helping in-stream flows, especially important in this dry time. Also in BHA, we have a legislative action committee, as the legislative session is live and well here in Utah. And if you have some bill of interest that comes up related to wildlands, water, wildlife, please feel free to reach out to BHA at utah@backcountryhunters.org. Also, please make sure to follow BHA and Trout Unlimited on social media to hear about upcoming events. And I'll put those hashtags in the chat box as well. And now for the exciting part, we are so pleased to have speakers from Trout Unlimited here. Brett Prettyman, Communications Director for Science, Western Water Habitat, and the Headwaters Program, specifically with youth initiatives. And then also Paul Burnett, the Utah Water and Habitat Program Lead. And he's done a lot of work in the Weber River watershed. So they will be presenting on the Cutthroat Slam tonight. And after they present, we'll have an opportunity for questions. Please put those in the chat box. And then at the end of the program, we'll have an opportunity draw for 2 Cutthroat Slam hats. So let's welcome Brett and Paul.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Melissa. And hi, everybody. I was scrolling through the names and I recognize a few people. George Weekly, I'm going to try not to mess up the cutthroat systematics too much. Call me out if I do. And Brett, I don't know if you want to say anything to start off. I can get my screen going here.
Well, just welcome to everybody, and thanks for tuning in tonight, or zooming in, as they say, I guess now. We're really excited to be here and talk to you about this cool program that the Trout Unlimited and the Utah Division Wildlife launched in 2016. It's been pretty successful, and we're pretty happy with how things have gone. We really view it as an opportunity for people to connect with native species and visit new places, go fishing with family and friends. It's just another excuse to get out and go fishing, and we all need that excuse, especially this last year. We had a record year in 2020. As like every other thing else that is outdoors related, people went outdoors and they went fishing and they participated in the slam. We had more registrations and more completions in 2020 than the first year of the slam. So we're really excited about the continued growth. We're excited that we had that there for people to go do during COVID. So yeah, go ahead, Paul.
All right. Well, thanks, Brett. All right. Well, so I guess just to start off, I think it's really good to kind of put what's happening in Utah, kind of in context of cutthroat management and distribution throughout the whole West. And so I just wanted to really quickly lead off and just talk about cutthroat in general. I have a really soft spot for cutthroat trout. I did my master's thesis on Bonneville cutthroat trout in Bear Lake, and I've worked with several different subspecies. But just to lead off, cutthroat trout they're a wide-ranging species of trout that occupy most cold water streams in the interior West. What's really interesting about cutthroat trout is over thousands of years, these different groups of cutthroat have invaded into different drainages, and then they became isolated, mostly kind of confined to river basins, and then they adapted over time to these regional conditions, giving rise to the well-known species of subspecies of cutthroat trout that we recognize today. The cutthroat trout subspecies are incredibly diverse across their geographic range, ranging from the desert-adapted Lahontan cutthroat trout, which are able to withstand droughts and hang out in pools, isolated pools and small streams during drought years. Bonneville cutthroat trout, which are adapted to warmer temperatures, to the lake-dwelling Yellowstone cutthroat trout that we're really familiar with, and even to the saline tolerance of coastal cuts. And what's really interesting is each population of cutthroat trout represents a really unique set of adaptations to their local waters. And it's really fascinating to learn about. And I just want to put a plug in for if you're interested in learning about cutthroat distributions and genetics, and want to do a deep dive, I would highly recommend doing a quick YouTube search for a professor named Dennis Shizawa. There's one video from him on YouTube. He was a professor at BYU. His name is Dennis Shizawa, and he's developed a whole theory on how different cutthroat trout subspecies have invaded throughout the West. It's really fascinating to watch. So I'm going to turn the time over to Brett. He's going to talk about the inception of the slam, and then I'm going to talk about the different subspecies.
Thanks, Paul. It's good to have that overview so that we have a better idea of what's going on here in Utah and people can understand. So I'm going to back up a little bit and tell you guys that well, maybe I'll wait till the next slide to get into severe details. But basically, I joined Trout Unlimited in 2015, and immediately joined the Division of Wildlife and trying to come up with this plan to get this launched. This is the first partnership that we know of in the country between a nonprofit and state government to do a slam like this. We're really excited about it. We feel like both partners really provide a different opportunity and resource in this, and that we feel really that's why it's been successful. One thing I'll say also is that if you look here, this is not just, so Paul and I represent national TU staff, but TU is about way more than the national staff. Of course, we have the state council here in Utah. We also have the state chapters. When we started working on this plan with the Division of Wildlife, we involved all levels of Trout Unlimited in the process. And so we're very committed to this and very excited about it. It's been full support, and I can explain more of that as we go on. Since this launch, there were some other states that were talking about possibly doing slams. The Western Native Trout Initiative, which is a collaboration of all the Western state wildlife agencies, had been thinking about doing a Western slam. They kind of saw that we were doing the Utah slam, and they decided to kind of see how that went, and it went well. So they asked us to help them plan their Western Trout Challenge, and we've been working with them to do that. I helped them produce the medallions, 2 of the different medallion levels for that program, and also just kind of the general overview of that entire program. So it's been fun to be a part of that, and we continue to work on other possible just last month I heard from Arizona Game and Fish. They wanted to talk about the possibility of setting one up. Nevada has one. We were working with them to expand that program. We did partner with Wyoming and create a medallion for their program, and are a partner with them. Not quite the level of partnership that we are here in Utah, but we also did it there. Idaho has talked about it. Montana has talked about it, and TU's been involved in all those. So we're really excited about that. We want people to know that we're not just here about conservation, that we really care about connecting people to fish. And one of the ways that we feel that people will be more committed to conservation is by caring about the fish. And that's what we want to happen with this. But really, like I said, the overall thing is for, it's an excuse to go fishing, and we hope it's with your family and friends, so you create lifelong memories. And that's what we've been seeing happen. So it's been really fun that way. Go ahead, Paul. So we launched this during the Wasatch Fly Fishing Expo on April 1st. It wasn't April Fool's. I mean, it was, but we didn't make it an April Fool's joke, on 2016. And it was pretty exciting. We had a big social media launch, and at the show, we auctioned off the first certificate, and that went to Tom Doxey here, who ended up completing it later that year with his wife. You know, he donated $500, or was the highest bidder, to help us launch the program. And when the certificate came out, he was listed as #1. He didn't get #1 on the overall thing, but his certificate says that, and he doesn't care. He just wanted to help promote the program. The guy over here on the right that you see practicing his bow cast is Paul Thompson. Paul was the main driver for the Division of Wildlife, as I was for Trout Unlimited. And Paul had a history with the slam. He was in Wyoming as a fisheries biologist, and I think a seasonal. He started there years ago, and they launched the Wyoming Cut Slam. Paul watched his mentor Ron Remick do that, and when he got to Utah, this was something he really wanted to do here. At the same time that Paul was thinking those things, as a fisheries biologist, I was a writer at the Salt Lake Tribune. I was the outdoors editor and fishing columnist, environmental writer. And I was poking the Division of Wildlife, saying, we should do this here. But they kept telling me that nobody cared, and that they didn't have the resources to do it. When I left the paper, after 25 years of teasing them about it, Greg Sheehan, who you see on the picture on the left, came to me and said, now that you're at now you're at Trout Unlimited, you can help make this happen. And I was honored and thrilled that I was given that opportunity to help make this happen. So Paul, I think, has done the slam 3 times now. His daughter completed it this year. His wife completed it. He's dedicated a lot of himself into this program, and we're really owe him a lot. And it's been really fun to work with him. Go ahead, Paul. All right, and then Paul's going to take over on the species part.
Yeah, so I'm gonna talk about the four subspecies of cutthroat trout that are in the Utah Cutthroat Slam, and a little bit of story about each, try to keep it interesting. So I'm going to start with the Bear River cutthroat. So I think, as everybody probably knows, the Bear River cutthroat, or the Bear River, is the longest river in the U.S. that doesn't ultimately reach an ocean. And the Bear River cutthroat trout have a really interesting story. So although the Bear River currently flows into Great Salt Lake and is the largest tributary to Great Salt Lake, it wasn't always the case. The Bear River prehistorically flowed into this as a tributary of the Snake River, and beginning about 140,000 to 35,000 years ago, there was a major volcanic eruption near Soda Springs, Idaho, which forced the entire river course to flow south. So if you go into Soda Springs, you can see a major dogleg that the Bear River makes and flows back towards the south. So of course, when that happened, it also isolated some of the fish that were in the upper Bear River. And this geographic isolation of the Bear River cutthroat trout in the Bear River Basin led to their unique life history. And the one thing about the Bear River cutthroat trout that we know is these fish grow big and they move long distances in main stem rivers. And there are several populations, really unique populations that still exist in Idaho and Wyoming and Utah that migrate 30 to 50 miles at least from main stem habitat to spawning tributaries. One of those populations is in the Upper Bear River, where one of our projects several years ago was an adoptive trout program with some high school students in Evanston. And we actually did radio telemetry there, and we tagged fish in Evanston and then tracked them up into the Upper Bear River into the Uinta Mountains, including East Fork of the Bear and Mill Creek. So really fascinating story behind these fish. Also, another side note, Bear River cutthroat trout are not an officially defined subspecies of cutthroat trout. As of yet, we do consider them a subspecies for the slam, but really interestingly, the genetics information really clearly shows that they are more closely related to Yellowstone cutthroat trout than Bonneville's, but they're different enough from Yellowstone's to not be considered Yellowstone cutthroat trout. So really interesting story with the Bear River cutthroat. The best places to catch these fish are up in the north slope of the Uintas on the Upper Bear. Logan River is also a really good place to catch these fish.
Hey, Paul, could I just add something here real quick?
Yeah.
One of the things that I suspected might happen when we launched the slam was that I just kind of foresaw that I'd be hearing from anglers saying, I caught a cutthroat at Strawberry. What fish can I cross off the list? and I just I waited for it to happen, and it didn't take long. I think it was about 2 weeks in. And what I told them was basically, well, that's a beautiful fish you caught. Congratulations, but it doesn't count because it's actually a Bear River cutthroat, commonly known to many people through the years as a Bonneville cutthroat, the Bear River strain in Strawberry. And that's not a Bear River drainage. That is a Colorado River drainage. So if you're catching a fish there, it shouldn't be there. Of course, the Division of Wildlife put them there for the reason that they can help control the Utah chub population, which is illegally introduced by anglers all the time. So, and that's because they thought that the Bear River cutthroat could, and the Bear Lake strain could, it evolved with Utah chub, and it was much more likely to feast on them, and it's worked. The Strawberries continues to be a trophy fishery, and it's because the cutthroat species that were selected to be there.
Yeah, and how could I neglect to talk about Bear Lake as well? Bear Lake is a really great story to tell of recovery. The fish in Bear Lake, again, like the Bear River fish, are really migratory. They live basically their whole adult life in Bear Lake, and then they migrate up 2 or 3 small tributaries for spawning. And back in as early as the 90s, or as recently as the 90s, all those spawning habitats were blocked, and over time, a huge effort's been put into place by TU and a whole range of partners, the states of Idaho and Utah, to reconnect those tributary habitats. And now upwards of 90% of the fish in the lake are now naturally reproduced, which is a really exciting story to tell, of a success story of those fish. Okay, so next on the list, of course, is the Bonneville cutthroat trout. I think everybody knows that this is our Utah state fish. It was established as the state fish in 1997. This subspecies of cutthroat trout was named after ancient Lake Bonneville, which was a huge interior lake, of which Great Salt Lake is a remnant. During Lake Bonneville's high stand, the Bonneville cutthroat trout lived in the lake and then spread into streams that entered into the lake. So these waters include places like the Weber, all the small tributaries on the Wasatch Front, Provo River, American Fork, Spanish Fork, plus even down into the Sevier River. Sevier River fish, if they're native, are Bonneville cutthroat trout. If you fish in water in that drainage that has cutthroat, and then of course the deep creeks in western Utah and Nevada.
Can I add another side note,
remnants. Yes, you can.
I just want to touch back on the Utah State Fish thing, because they were not always the state fish of Utah. There was a fourth grade class from West Valley that petitioned the legislature in 1997 to get the state fish changed from rainbow trout, which are not native to Utah, of course, to the native fish, which the pioneers utilized pretty heavily when they first arrived in the valley. And the 30-pound lake trout or the 30-pound Bonneville cuts at Utah Lake helped sustain the Mormon pioneers when they arrived for that first year. So they really do deserve to be the state fish, and the kids made sure of it.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, so most of the Bonneville cutthroat trout now are kind of isolated to smaller tributary streams. You can see a couple of these photos that show that even though they're in small streams, there's still some nice cutthroat to catch. Although some of these streams are a little bit challenging in terms of casting technique. So you can see here one of my colleagues doing a bow and arrow cast to hit a small pool. So another interesting story about the genetics and the life histories of these fish. Cutthroat trout caught in the Weber and the Ogden River are kind of a bonus for the slam. You can actually use actually consider a cutthroat trout that you catch in the Ogden or Weber River drainage as either a Bonneville or a Bear River. And the reason why is when we've done genetic analyses on all the populations within the Weber River Basin, most of the populations are actually some sort of a natural hybrid between Bear River and Bonneville cutthroat trout, and it can be tracked down to the genetic level, which is really a pretty fascinating thing. So for the slam, what you can do is you can either, if you do catch a fish in the Weber River Basin, you can either count that as a Bear River or a Bonneville, one or the other, but not both. All right, on to the Yellowstone cutthroat. So the Yellowstones are really fascinating in Utah. They're pretty widespread throughout, Montana and Idaho and Wyoming. But in Utah, we encompass the very, very southwest part of their range, and so in Utah, where they're native, they occur in the very extreme northwest part of the state. There's only about 4 or 5 streams out in the Raft River Mountains that support native Yellowstone cutthroat trout still, and they're all tiny. So you can see the picture on the right here, on the upper right, kind of shows you the fishing conditions in a lot of these streams. This is almost as good as it gets. You're driving 3 to 4 hours on dirt roads to get to a stream that's maybe 1.5 feet wide with a 10-inch deep pool. And you get out there and you think, why am I here? And you catch a fish, and maybe it's 4 inches, maybe it's a little bit longer, and you're excited about it because this is by far the most challenging, most difficult fish to get to. Also, from a life or from a trout perspective, because these fish are on the extreme edge of the range of Yellowstone cutthroat trout, these are really, really unique populations. And so, like, when we're catching fish out there, like, those are fish that have been isolated for a long time and have been living in those waters for a long time without any sort of connection to the Snake River. And so really unique populations. Just a note that we really strongly recommend that if you do plan to go out into the West Desert, that you reach out to the Division of Wildlife Resources Northern Region office and just ask them for up-to-date information on stream flows, fishing conditions, that sort of thing. Things change out there, and it's a long trip to get skunked. And so you definitely want to have a good plan when you go out there. Anything else you want to add on that one, Brett?
Nope, I think you covered it. It's an adventure, and this is the place where I hear most people say, I never would have imagined that I'd go out there to fish. And they're so glad they did, because it is an experience. And for a lot of people, it's the last fish they get for the slam. And it's very rewarding. That a 4-inch fish has never meant so much to you.
Yep, that's true. And so this photo on the bottom here is my 4-inch cutthroat trout that I caught, and I was really excited about, and did a terrible job taking the photo because I had a black shirt and the fish was washed out, and I was actually really worried that they weren't going to count it for my slam, but it did count. So
Yeah, I had to have my 10-year-old son take my picture. So he did a better job than you did, Paul. That's my
yeah,
fish
right.
on the top left for my second slam.
All right, and then finally, of course, is the Colorado River cutthroat trout. They occupy pretty much the entire eastern part of the state, especially once you get to Provo south. Everything east of the Wasatch Divide, except for the Sevier River, is Colorado River cutthroat trout. So that that includes all the tributaries of the Green and Colorado rivers. Also includes the north and south slope of the Uintas. And most of these fish, most of these Colorado River cutthroat have been really pushed up and isolated into really small tributary habitats. So again, probably small stream fishing for Colorado River cutthroat trout. There's a few places where there still are some main stem dwelling Colorado River cuts. But yeah, be prepared for some small river fishing and some really unique landscapes. Again, the genetics behind these fish are really unique. I'm not going to go into the details, but there's been a lot of really interesting research that's been done on the genetics of Colorado River cutthroat trout, and I'm not going to go into any more detail than that, except that if you're really interested, you should definitely do some research on these fish. They're quite fascinating. All right, Brett, you're up.
Thanks, Paul. So I just want to kind of give you a little explanation about how this all works. When we first started putting the slam together, we had a kind of a long debate about whether we should charge people to do it. Greg Sheehan from the Division of Wildlife and Chris Wood from Trout Unlimited, the CEO, I had discussions with both of them, and they both felt like, why shouldn't we charge people to do it? It's $20. It's not a ton of money, and 19 of that goes back to conservation projects, and you're going to see the results of that here in a minute. I'm really excited and proud to say that because the program has been pretty successful, that we've been able to do work that's benefited all the different subspecies of cutthroat across the state. That includes the Yellowstone. So we're really excited that we're have that reach and that capacity, and it's because of that $20. It's $10 for youth. The $1, it goes back to the Division of Wildlife for administrative fees, sending the medallion and the certificate out, and just handling that process. But this is where I tell you that the Utah Council of Trout Unlimited and the chapters and the national TU all came together on this. The council gave money, the chapters gave money to fund the purchase of the first round of medallions, so that you're not, when you pay $20, you're not paying for your medallion, you're not paying for your certificate, you're paying for conservation work to be done on native cutthroat. And that is really key to this program. And basically, Paul and I were talking about this earlier. You should always have active cutthroat slam, because you registration, because you have to register before you start technically. You should always have one, because you just never know when you might end up catching a cutthroat in the right place. So I try to keep mine, as soon as I get one done, I register again. I've registered my entire family for it. I don't know how many of them will actually do it, but this is the kind of thing that if you care about trout, you care about cold, clean water and the conservation work we do, it's $20. It helps, so anyway, so then of course you have to catch the fish in their native range. I talked about that a little bit when it came to strawberry. I have a lot of people that say they catch Yellowstones on the Skyline Drive all the time. And that's because that's where they used to have a broodstock fishery at Electric Lake. And they always want to count them. And I explain to them that those are, they don't count. So that's one thing you have to take into consideration for this, so that you understand the different ranges that these fish lived in. So you take a picture of the fish. It doesn't matter if it's, you are in it, if you can tell who you are. It just matters that we see you with the fish. Hopefully you're smiling. Hopefully we can see the slash that lets us know that it's a cutthroat. Once you guys submit those pictures, the Division of Wildlife takes a look at those pictures and decides if they're legit or not. And they look to see where you've listed that you caught the fish as well. We don't turn many people away, but we have. There's some pretty obvious rainbows that have shown up. I think a couple of brook trout have shown up. But people that have been told that that fish was not a cutthroat, or they caught it in the wrong place, are typically pretty happy to go back out and fish again. It's an excuse, and they like it. So once the Division of Wildlife approves the fish, I get a notification. A secretary in the division office gets a notification. She sends out the medallion and the certificates, and I put the pictures up on the Utah Cutthroat Slam website. And that's the process. Go ahead, Paul. And this is where you find the information. The division, basically you go into the website like you're going to buy a fishing license, and you'll see an option for purchasing the slam. You will get a hard copy like you do for a fishing license. You can also download it on your phone in the division's app. You don't have to have it on you when you're fishing for the slam. It's just we ask you to purchase it first, and the reason for that too was also because we felt like if people paid for it in advance, they'd feel like they had to get their money's worth, so they would do it. And the license is just there. The license is just there to serve as a reminder that you signed up for it and you should go do it. You don't have to have it with you. And then so Trout Unlimited, as part of the partnership, set up the UtahCutthroatSlam.org website. We manage that. It includes maps that show the different areas, has the best places, or not the best places, but good options for you to go pursue the fish. There's some contact info on the website to reach out to myself, or I can reach out to the division. Like Paul said, with the Yellowstone, we really encourage people, especially during drought years, high water flow season, that you call the division, the Northern Region Office Fisheries folks, and you ask them what's going on out there. We want you to have a successful trip, and they can help. So we suggest you do that. Otherwise, you can check out the SLAM website and get the details that you need, and hopefully eventually see your pictures there. We have a ton of pictures there. We have over 700 completions now. So people are, each person send 4 pictures, and I've posted every single one of them up on the website, and it's backed up the website. So I'm now actually, unfortunately, in the process of removing some of the first 100 or so pictures so that we have room on the website, so you don't have to wait for 3 minutes for the page to load. But there are pictures there, and you can see what other anglers their success has been. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add about the map. We wanted to have a good guide for people, but we didn't want to give away where all the fish are. So the map highlights sub watersheds that we know have cutthroat trout in them, but it doesn't go any finer detail than that. So it does still require folks to do a little bit of research in terms of specific waters and how you actually get to those waters. But at least it provides a guide of kind of general areas where you're going to have some potential luck in catching cutthroat.
Right, so we've got the social media. You have to have that these days, right? So you can see here, this is the Facebook page. That's Heidi Lewis in the picture there. She's part of the TU Council, the Utah Council, and she's one hell of an angler. And she loved writing doing the slam, and she had some friends come in. Jen Ripple from Dunn Magazine came out and did it with her. Actually, Jen was the only one of the 4 women that went out to do it that did not finish it. I can't remember which one it was she didn't get now. But we keep telling her she's got to come back out. We've had a lot of national attention on this. Orvis came out for a week and did a daily blog about their efforts, Phil Monahan, to try to complete the slam. He did complete the slam. Had a lot of fun taking him around and showing him what it was all about. So you see the social media there. I will say about the pictures, and I can't remember if the next slide talks on this or not, but you know, we do encourage keep them wet, and you can go ahead and move it, Paul. We do encourage keep them wet, and also catch and release. This is not a catch and release program. This is you follow the Utah fishing regulations, and you're following the regulations for the slam. We did not want to exclude anybody from being able to participate in this. You could catch all of these species within open waters for the Division of Wildlife, so we saw no reason to change that. I can't tell you the pleasure it brings me to see a picture like this little boy here that comes up when I'm adding these to the website. Those smiles make it for me. That's really what it's all about. And that's a kid who probably will think about the adventure he took with his family to do this, you know, for the rest of his life, and hopefully grow up being a fisherman and being somebody who cares about the resource and wants to help engage in efforts to promote programs like this. As you can see here, the numbers are pretty good. I'll tell you that Wyoming has had their slam for more than 25 years now. I think they're on 26 or 27. They've had about 1,400 people complete it in that time. We've had almost 3,000 people register to pay for it. They're they told me that they regretted that they did not make a change when we joined them in the partnership and started providing the medallions, because it works. We're seeing the money on the road. We just passed 708 completions. I'm working right now on a story from the family that finished around 700. A 15-year-old girl was number 700, and her mom and dad and 3 siblings are all around her on that 700 mark. And it's really a fun little story that we're going to be putting out on social media with the Division of Wildlife and TU here coming up pretty soon. We're seeing, you know, that's a pretty impressive number. But if you look at how many anglers overall are registered, it's kind of, it's not where we want the women to be. We want more women doing this. And to be completely honest with you, a lot of the women that we're seeing are daughters, young daughters of in families that are doing it. And we really want to see more women participate in this. And so get your wife, get your girlfriend, get your sister, get them out there. Let them experience what it's all about. It's fun, and it's really worth it. And we've had great success across the country. And this was before we were seeing this kind of success, even before the Winty Slam was launched. You know, 43 states is pretty good as far as having where they've registered from. And I think it was about a year and a half ago, we had somebody from Canada register. So we're pretty excited about that. If you know people in the states that haven't yet registered yet, get them out here and tell them to do it. I want to see the whole country filled in on our map. So yeah, it's been really good. And I saw a question here that you asked if it's an annual thing. It's not. This is a opportunity to, it's a lifetime opportunity, right? So register now. You can decide your own timeline. You want to do it in 24 hours? Go for it. It's been done. It's been done with 24 hours with people using the exact same fly for every fish. We have people who've done it 8 times. And I think the one guy I know of got it up to 6, and he tried to fish a different water for every time he did it. You can set your own kind of personal goals for this, but you don't have to do it in any amount of time. You have your entire life. When you register, it's from now until you go fishing in the sky. So there's no requirement to get it done this year or in 10 years. It's all the time you need. What we find a lot is people want to do the slam. They go out, they do it. Their friends hear that they did it, and they say, "Oh, well, you did it. Now you know how to do it. You can take me." So the guy becomes a guide, right, for everybody else. And then he ends up saying, "Well, if I'm going to go again, I'm just going to register again." And that's why we get the multiple numbers. I think one of the other main reasons we get multiple numbers is because people want to display this. They're proud of it. That's part of why we did the medallions. And they want to show both sides of the medallions. I see a lot of shadow cases with pictures of the fish they caught, their certificate, both sides of the medallion, and the fly that they used. So there's a lot of ways to celebrate this as well. So yeah, go ahead, Paul. Go ahead and move to the next one.
All right. Well, this is, I guess, just to add, I took me 3 years to complete my first slam. I've only done one, and I think I've purchased, like, I think I'm on my 5th slam purchase. So I usually just buy it with my license, actually. But this is exciting for me as a restoration practitioner. This is kind of where we are able to close the loop, and it's really exciting. So where does the money go for the slam? This is so as Brett mentioned, 19 of the $20 goes to a funding account specifically dedicated to cutthroat trout conservation. And one of the first projects that we completed with the Cutthroat Slam money was this Strawberry Creek fish ladder on the Weber River. And this was a really interesting project. You can see here on this map, this green line is the length of this culvert of Strawberry Creek under I-84. Strawberry Creek is an important tributary to the Weber River. Back in the 2011s, 2012 time period, we saw large numbers of cutthroat trout stacking up below at the bottom end of this culvert, trying to migrate upstream to spawn, and none of them could make it. They'd make it maybe 30 feet up, if that, maybe 20. They'd get exhausted and they'd just basically be swept back downstream, and they just repeatedly try to do that over and over. This culvert was built when the interstate was built in 1969. It's 385 feet long, so it's like a football. It is a football. It's longer than a football field, and the scale of this culvert, it doesn't do justice until you actually get down into it and you actually see how long this culvert is. And it's at a 5% slope. There's no way that fish can move up this culvert. And basically,
especially
what we
during
did,
high water.
yeah, right. And so, we were able to leverage not only Cutthroat Slam funding, but also funding from a large range of funders, partners, like the Fish and Wildlife Service, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, the Division of Wildlife Blue Ribbon Council, Orvis and Patagonia actually put money towards this project. And we built a vertical slot fish ladder with 43 steps. So basically, step by step, every 9 feet up this culvert. And then we were able to document fish moving through this in 2017. So we built the fish ladder in 2016, and fish were moving through it in 2017. Some other projects that we've partially funded through the Slam. I think everybody's probably familiar with our restoration work up in Mill Creek, just outside of Salt Lake City, where we've actually reclaimed essentially the whole drainage for Bonneville cutthroat trout. Jacobs Creek, which is pictured here, is another tributary to the Weber, and I've got an animation I'm going to show on the next slide that kind of shows the importance of these small tributaries in the Weber. But on the right here, you can see that it was basically a cascade of water coming out of this culvert, and with the Cutthroat Slam, we were able to actually restore an approach that fish could migrate up and migrate through this culvert. This culvert was blocking about half the fish that were trying to move into Jacobs Creek for spawning. Beaver Creek up on the LaSalle Mountains, we're working on replacing a road culvert there with the Forest Service we've done some work up in the Logan River, and we just recently are going to start using some Cutthroat Slam money to do barrier assessments in the Duchesne and the Provo rivers to get a good picture of how fragmented and chopped up the habitat is, where the barriers are in those basins, so we can start moving forward with restoration in those basins as well. So this is hopefully it works. I'm going to stream this from YouTube and over Zoom. But this is an animation that the Division of Wildlife put together for us. Yeah,
these were fish that. Oh, is it going to take a second? So
no, it's not going to work.
Oh, bummer.
So I'll animate. I'll animate with my mouse pointer. So basically, in the early 2000s, 2010s, the Division of Wildlife did a major tagging program in the Weber River here. This is the Weber going left to right. Downstream is left, upstream is right. And we tagged a large number of fish that were in the river, and then we would follow them into these tributaries to spawn. And so these dark marks here that you can barely see, these are all road culverts or irrigation diversions or dams. And some of them block fish, some of them don't. But the movement data showed us really clearly that these fish are moving through the main stem, and then during the spawning season, they're hitting these points and they're stopped. And they sit there for a few days and they give up, turn back to the river. This fish specifically tried to move up Strawberry Creek, couldn't get past this culvert, went down and back into the river and tried to go up Jacobs Creek, got blocked on this culvert, which is the one that we repaired. And then in the interim of this fish's movement, we actually installed the fish ladder and it moved up. We saw this fish move up into Strawberry Creek for the first time in 50 years. And then we've also documented fish moving up past this culvert here. And this is really important spawning habitat for these cutthroat trout because, yeah, thanks, Brett. Thanks for posting that. Because all of the spawning habitat for the cutthroat and the Weber is in tributary habitats. And they have to move into these small, tiny streams for spawning. And so Cutthroat Slam was really instrumental in making these projects happen. And it's really exciting to see these projects get on the ground. Okay, so just in closing, you know, I think I can speak for Brett in saying that we're really proud of this program, and we think that the partnership with the Division of Wildlife has accomplished a lot in terms of cutthroat conservation and stewardship and restoration, and with partners such as BHA and TU and some of our large funding partners like the Division of Wildlife and Fish and Wildlife Service and NRCS and several foundations. We're really excited to see anglers responsibly pursuing these fish that, you know, for a long time were overlooked as an angling opportunity. Plus it's our hope that people enjoying these resources are also, that they wouldn't normally go to, are also inclined to boost the rural economies that surround these fisheries. Brett, do you have anything to say in closing?
No, I just really want to say that, you know, I think that Utah anglers have been really wanting something to do with for them. You know, big game gets a lot of love in Utah, and I think anglers kind of felt like they were anxious for something like this, and we felt like that was what we were giving them, and we've seen the success of that. People are very excited about this opportunity. Like I said, the COVID situation really created a lot more interest in it, and we've seen a ton of families. It's just so, like I said, rewarding. And I should also mention that some of the money that we've raised has been used for outreach as well. We've constructed some kiosk poster boards at different locations in partnership with the division to explain the different species. We've funded research to help figure out how to strengthen the populations. As Paul mentioned, one of our really super big success stories is Bear Lake. And for us to, you know, the majority of fish caught there now at the lake itself are coming from natural recruitment. And you know, I think if we compare that to things like the hatchery steelhead and the wild steelhead, there's a difference, and we know it. And it's fun to think about the opportunities we have to do more of this. I'm somebody who gets really kind of irritated when people say that cutthroat are easy fish to catch, they don't fight, and they don't get big. I totally disagree. I think if we give them the opportunity to live in their natural environment, that they're gonna flourish, and they're gonna get big, and they're gonna you know. I've seen some pictures of, you know, what was it, like a 23-pound Bonneville came out of East Canyon not too long ago. I mean, really, this is, if we give them the opportunity and we focus on trying to do that, then it'll happen. And the Cutthroat Slam is helping people understand that and helping us find funds to do it at the same time. So
Yep. And on that note, Brett was going to give me a hard time about putting this photo for the thank you because he wanted me to show bigger fish. But to be honest, there are going to be some times when you're going to be excited about a 4-inch fish, and that's a good thing. So I thought this kind of exemplifies the experience of the Yellowstones. So I guess we have some questions in the chat. Maybe the best thing is for us to go through.
I think I've kind of answered them as we've been going, Paul. I tried to kind of keep up with them, but people are kind of asking when's the best time, and you know, typical cutthroat season, right? Like high country, kind of. I mentioned in the thing that I caught my first Yellowstone in May. It was high water, and I went really high to find the fish, but it was worth it. And we were out there I think we were doing some electroshocking, right, Paul? And we just took advantage of the opportunity to go try to get some. And so in that case, though, we were there, so we went. But I would suggest that if you're going to try to go early season, especially for the Yellowstone, that you contact probably Matt McKell specifically at the Division of Wildlife in the Northern Region office and ask him. And if you have a hard time reaching him, reach out to me. We have a national TU staffer, Jim Dorito, who is over the Raft River Mountains and has seen all of our conservation work out there, and he stays in touch with the conditions out there as well. I really want to emphasize that Yellowstone was one that we really talked about. We were a little concerned about with this. Because it is a sensitive population in tiny streams, and we were concerned, but we're monitoring that. If anything, we've seen the fish get bigger and more healthy. So we're really excited that they're doing well out there, and that people are enjoying the experience of going out to catch them.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. And yeah, I did have a question about that, and if we're concerned about drought out there, and in general, drought is a big concern, especially in those small isolated streams, and that is one of the reasons why we are encouraging folks, if they're going to go out there, to reach out to the Division of Wildlife if conditions are not good for fishing. If there's a risk of you know, fish dying because of fishing, then yeah, we wouldn't recommend going out there and during those times. In general, small streams like out in the West Desert are at higher risk to drought, and that's just a general concern. And that's one of the reasons why, in practice, you know, we're really advocating for, especially in places like the West Desert, of trying to replicate our population so that they're in more than one water, either replicating them or doing some of the work like we're doing in the Weber, where we're trying to reconnect these isolated tributaries into the main stem so that the fish have the opportunity to move between these habitats, and that if there is a disaster, either a fire or a drought or something like that, that they have the ability to refound. So
yeah, and I'll add to that a little bit. Wildfire is becoming a larger and larger concern every year. We're seeing more of that every year, and people don't tend to think of the devastation to fish as much as they do to other animals when wildfire happens. And we can lose an entire unique population with one fire. And so multiple. Biologists are trying to move the fish around to put them in places where they're native, but also or they can be a stronghold. And if a fire comes through, maybe it won't hit all three canyons. It might just hit one. Hey, Paul, Ashley, or Melissa, sorry, asked a question about the different temperature gradients that trout live in. And you mentioned the Lahontan's pretty early on. They're pretty tolerant, but they're also tolerant to salty waters, right? Because Pyramid Lake is pretty salty.
Yeah, it's brackish. Yep.
So they have different gradients. It kind of depends on where they are, but can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit. In terms of temperature gradients, the Bonneville and the Lahontan cutthroat trout are probably the most have the greatest ability to withstand warmer temperatures. And I don't have the information right off the top of my head, but Bonneville cutthroat trout can live in waters that exceed 70 degrees as long as it still cools off at night. If you have a place where temperatures exceed 70 and then they stay above 70 even at night, then we really start losing the cutthroat trout. They just can't sustain temperatures that warm. So I would say 70 degrees for Bonnevilles is and Bear Rivers. I consider those kind of the same. Sorry, they're still kind of the same in my mind, but Bonnevilles and Bear Rivers, they do kind of have that ability. I wouldn't, if the water's warmer than that, I would probably maybe not fish. If it's warmer than that long term, then we do really worry about those fish being able to survive long term, especially if we have droughts like we did in 2020 and 2018 and put a few of those years together. We definitely risk losing those fish. The other way that we're trying to so we know that fish have these thermal requirements. The other way that we're trying to conserve fish in those types of scenarios is that we know that during the fall and the winter and spring, habitat that's too warm in the summer is actually suitable during the other times of the year. So it's really important that fish have the ability to move up and down river systems, because they will track temperatures, and if it gets cold or if it gets hot, they will start moving upstream. And if they get blocked by a barrier, then we start really getting worried about losing them. So that's kind of one of our big efforts in several different basins across the state, is trying to reconnect those habitats and making sure that those fish have the opportunity to move up and downstream. So it's not just for spawning, but it's also for temperature.
And that's really plays into something that we had a Trout Unlimited movie come out this summer regarding Lahontan cutthroat, and it's in California and Oregon. But this really taps into what Paul's talking about, this opportunity for the fish to be able to move through the main stem to the main stem and go up other places. This is important in case of wildfire, in case of pollution or whatever. They can go somewhere else. It's just like us. We want to go somewhere else if there's something going on that's not good for us. In this case, we're doing genetic studies to try to see if there are certain fish that have been secluded for so long that they've developed better adaptations to warmer water and climate change. And then we're trying to mix those populations of Lahontan cutthroat to see if that kind of the survival of the fittest type of scenario, where those fish that, let's say, like, in the Madison River in Montana fought off whirling disease, they became the fish that survived. And they were the ones that pass it on their genes. And it's the same kind of thing that we're trying to do in other parts of the country. This research, Trout Unlimited has a science team. Paul is involved in that. I'm involved with it. One of our other Utah TU staffers is super involved in it. And we're trying to figure out the best way to do conservation, and science is the answer in our minds. I put the link to that video. I think it's called Lahontan, a Trout Unlimited Science Story. If you get a few minutes, you should watch it. It's pretty interesting. And then Paul, you could probably answer Dan's question. I don't know if you can see it, but it's about the Bear River Bonneville speciation issue, or not issue, but how where's a place where we can find more information about that?
Okay, so before I answer that, I've got one highlighted on my text that I wanted to get to. So Bill asked about the cutthroat trout near Causey Reservoir up by Camp Kiesel, upstream of Causey Reservoir, and what the genesis of those fish are. So that's in the Ogden River drainage. So those are Bonneville cutthroat. If I recall correctly, the genetics of those fish are actually like 90% Bear River cutthroat and 10% Bonnevilles. I'm going off memory on that, but pretty typical of a cutthroat trout in the Weber. It's some sort of a blend between Bear Rivers and Bonnevilles. In terms of, let's see, where's that question about the Bonneville Bear Rivers?
It's just a question about where can you get more information about why we're counting them for both and how that happened. And it's because the Bear River used to, it does dump into Great Salt Lake and is the part of the Bonneville Lake scenario. But before that, it was connected to the Yellowstone or to the Snake River and the Yellowstone cutthroat.
Yeah. So there's so because we've typically been managing cutthroat trout based on the basins. When we first started getting really into the cutthroat trout conservation world, especially for Bonnevilles, we were basically encompassing everything that flowed into Great Salt Lake as the Bonneville Basin, and those were all Bonneville cutthroat trout. So we started doing the conservation work way before we had the genetics technology to really understand the nuances of the different populations. And so they were managed kind of within that Bear River framework or the Bonneville framework for a long time. Then as we started doing genetic analyses, we started seeing these differences. In fact, the Bear River fish were really coming out differently than like the main Bonnevilles, like in the Provo. And so, just over time, as more genetic work has come out, I would really recommend that video. Maybe I can find a link when Brett's talking of Dennis Shiazawa talking about the different cutthroat trout subspecies and genetics. He lays out pretty clearly how different the Bear River fish are from the Bonnevilles. And that's kind of like his work has really been kind of the impetus for us to start separating and making justifications to separate the Bear River fish from the main Bonneville. There's also a paper. It's a technical research paper by I think it's Locksterman and Keeley out of Idaho State University, who did some genetic analysis as well, and they kind of came up with a similar grouping of fish based on genetic similarities. And I think they actually grouped the Yellowstones in Utah with the Bear River fish. They're kind of similar, but yeah.
Isn't there a new book out, Paul? AFS and TU and some other people put out a Cutthroat of the World book or something. Do you remember that? I'll have to look and see. If you guys go to the Cutthroat Slam page, like tomorrow or the next day, I'll try to add some of this information there. And if this recording's available, maybe we can share that out too as well. Paul, I found a video. It says BYU Cutthroat Trout Research, and Shiwazawa is on there, but I don't know that it's the right one. It talks about them being at the West Fork of the Duchesne.
Let's see. It's the phylogenetic relationships of cutthroat trout.
Wow,
the name
that's
of that
not this one.
So I've got it pulled up. I'm gonna share this right now to the chat.
Perfect.
And just to interrupt the great questions just for a second, we have done our random drawing and we will announce those winners. And I think they're still on here. Josh Bennett and Jerry Bassford. I see Jerry
Awesome.
on here.
Yay. Congrats. And we have we have two hats. We've got they're the Winty hats. The Rep Your Water, sorry, they're wrapped up still. One's a Bonneville and one's a Yellowstone.
I thought that Yellowstone was mine, Paul. What are you doing?
Sorry, Brett.
Backcountry Hunters and Anglers will be in touch with both of you to get your information and to get those hats out to you.
Yeah, we'll get those to you.
And George posted in the comments the name of that book, Trout and Char of the World. And
yes.
it's I've been kind of drooling about that one. I haven't got it yet, but I want to really bad. I'm kind of a cutthroat country genetics geek.
Okay, I haven't kept up with the chat. Are there any other questions that are unanswered?
Somebody asked what cuts are on the Boulder Mountains, Colorado River cuts. That's where we took Orvis when we did the slam with them, and that was a wonderful trip. The division's doing a lot of great things with the Colorados and the Boulders. We're really excited about what's happening down there.
Yes, refuge populations for rare trout is a good idea given climate change. I agree with that, Robert. And we actually have some metrics we're trying to meet based on the different drainage basins. And so if we know that if we have, I can't remember the number, 5 or 6 populations per kind of river basin, then we're more confident in the long-term sustainability of those populations.
As an example, I went out over to Great Basin National Park last fall and went with biologists and a horseman's group that took Bonneville Cutthroat up to a lake to create a refuge for them. So they had a population because they had already lost one of the populations in a fire. And they were trying to, make sure that the creek that there was some left in had a population, but if a fire came through there, then they wanted to have another refuge population. And so I helped, I rode a horse, I think 8 miles up to this high elevation lake in Great Basin, and we put fish up there, and there's not as much threat of fire or climate change there. It's a place that's going to be a fishery, but it's also a refuge. And so if they need to get fish back into that system, should a fire happen, that's the possibility. There'll be a video and a story on the TU channels coming out on that in a little while.
Awesome. And Brett, I'm posting the Lockstrom and Keeley paper as well.
Sweet. That's great. It's a lot of great stuff. And one thing I'm just going to say really quickly is that some people ask, there's other species of cutthroat in Utah, and why aren't we counting them? There's an explanation about that on the SLAM page. They would be Lahontan cutthroat trout, and this is probably worthy of a whole entire different discussion about how the Lahontan cutthroat trout in Pyramid Lake came from a tiny little stream in northwestern Utah. And the amazing man that found those fish. He had some help, but he's my conservation hero. Paul and I are trying to get Don Duff to sit down and do a video with us and just talk about that whole process, about how he found those Lahantans in the middle of nowhere where they weren't supposed to be, and how now people are catching 27 pounders in Pyramid Lake because he did. So there are some Lahantans in Utah, and there's some actually in Ogden that people don't know about. There's also a population of Colorado River cutthroat that, this is where it gets crazy on the LaSalle's, right? So there's a population that the division is currently recognizing as greenback cutthroat. There's some discussion about the genetic lineage of those, and they're trying to figure out if they are just an ancient lineage of Colorado River cutthroat, which probably makes more sense. I think it's the only population of greenbacks that they've identified on the west side of the Colorado River. But so we're not counting those either because we're not sure what they are, and the division's not sure either yet. So we're still trying to figure that one out. But there are 2 other species in Utah that you guys can target if you like.
And luckily, we've got a Colorado River cutthroat expert in George Keeley, or George Weekly on the call. So, George, you can tell us the story on those Beaver Creek fish, because I wasn't going to go there.
Yeah,
it's a tricky one.
Tricky. So basically, the long story is they were initially considered greenback cutthroat trout, and as greenback cutthroat trout, they're a threatened species under the endangered species list. But we know that they're in all likelihood not greenback cutthroat trout, but we're not sure if that lineage of Colorado River cutthroat are a distinct new subspecies separate from other lineages of Colorado River cutthroat trout. And so we're waiting on some genetics work, and I work for the Fish and Wildlife Service, and we're doing a species status assessment on greenback cutthroat trout that hopefully will kind of distinguish that lineage and determine whether it's a unique subspecies and whether that unique subspecies is, if it is a unique subspecies, whether that's worthy of listing under the Endangered Species Act or not as well.
Thanks, George. Needless to say, that's a protected species. You can go fish for them, but it's catch and release only.
That's correct.
Yeah,
it's
and
a very small stream, so
yeah.
I generally don't encourage people to fish for them, though.
I think I accidentally caught some there in the 90s.
That's okay. Jordan Nielsen and I went and did some non-selective sampling for them once.
So Scott, Scott, Jan, maybe you could help me out. There is a Western States Cutthroat Challenge. I mentioned it. It's the Western Native Trout Initiative's Western Trout Challenge. It's pretty intense. And what we saw when it first launched last year, it's not even been around for a year yet, but the people are, they're like, I think I looked at once when they announced the first, like 14 people that did the first level of that slam, and 9 of them had come to Utah. So people are using the Utah Cutthroat Slam. So if you're thinking about doing these slams around the West, like coming to Utah or Nevada or Wyoming, then you should be thinking about the possibility of doing these different levels of the Western Native Trout Challenge. And let me see if I can find that website. There's some really good stuff on that page too.
I'm just looking through the chat. Looks like we've got all the questions answered.
Speak now or forever hold your peace. I just posted the Western Native Trout Challenge page.
Any more questions out there? All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. This has been just awesome hearing about this. And I know I'm going to be signing up. I like to go fly fishing in the Uintas, and this gives me the motivation to really get out and experience new parts of the state. So please feel free to reach out to us at Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. And also you have Brett and Paul's contact information. And happy fishing, and we look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, thanks everybody, and thanks for hosting us, Melissa.
It'll be great to see everyone hopefully on the riverbanks or high alpine lakes or off the side of the road on the Weber sometime.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.